This week, the Kathryn Bigelow directed House of Dynamite dropped on Netflix, and it's fair to say that when it came to the ending, the collective reaction was... Why though? Well, the answer in large part lies in this 5-second clip from a Q&A posted by the Oscars, which shows how just one creative decision can be the difference between success and failure. In this episode, we'll revisit that clip and examine why endings are so important and why you are so often underwhelmed by them, and what it has to do with this, and this, which is a crisis that is decades in the making. This little guy is Russian playwright Anton Chekhov, and this is his gun. You may have heard of it. This sometimes literal but mostly metaphorical gun is the dramatic principle that every significant element introduced in a story must have a purpose. That if a gun is shown hanging on the wall in the first act, it must be fired by the last. Otherwise, it shouldn't be shown at all. The principle is about story economy, but it's also about audience expectation. The best storytellers don't only think about themselves and their characters, but also factor in where their audience is at any one time. My Chekhov's gun for this episode is the clip I introduced at the start that exposes House of Dynamite's ultimate fatal creative mistake, which we'll come back to. A House of Dynamite is about a nuclear warhead heading towards the city of Chicago and is a literal countdown to the moment it strikes, only it ends without the strike itself. We don't see it hit, we don't even see whether it hits, we don't know why it was fired, and we don't see what happens next, as in the most interesting part. Chekhov's gun is a more nuanced idea than this, but crudely speaking, for mainstream movies, it means that if you introduce a bomb as a major element of your story, you better be sure and blow something up. Even movies about stopping a bomb going off include an explosion, illustrated here by The Rock, which saves a stadium full of people but blows Nicolas Cage clean off Alcatraz. It's an unwritten rule. If you introduce a bomb, by all means stop it from going off, but the audience has got to get something in return. This is not because the story is better this way, it's because you painted yourself into a corner the moment you made a bomb the center of your story. Is this the case for all movies? Well, that's where genre comes in. And this is the first of 3 ways that A House of Dynamite went wrong with their ending. I couldn't watch A House of Dynamite without constantly thinking of Dr Strangelove, which tells an almost identical story, cutting between 3 similar strands and locations and culminating in the same conclusion. The difference between them? Well, there's a few, but when it comes to the success or failure of the ending, the key difference is genre.
Well, now, what happened is one of our base commanders, he had a sort of, well, he went a little funny in the head. You know, just a little funny. And he went and did a silly thing. Well, I'll tell you what he did. He ordered his planes to attack your country. Well, let me finish, Dmitri. Let me finish, Dmitri. Well, listen, how do you think I feel about it?
Dr Strangelove is a satire, a biting one. It's equally horrifying as funny, not least because it's based on a very serious book about a possible real-life scenario. But it's a comedy nonetheless. A House of Dynamite, by contrast, is a thriller. A thriller is a narrative built around tension. Its central engine is suspense. The audience knows something terrible will happen and stays engaged through the delay of that event until it comes to pass. And the promise of the ending is the heartbeat of the plot. The goal of satire, by contrast, is not suspense but insight, to shine a light on the truth of something by taking it to extremes, using absurdity and ridicule to expose the flaws or hypocrisy of a situation. Put simply, in a satire, audience expectation is delivered across the whole story, while in a thriller, that expectation is saved up till the end. In other words, in a thriller, the ending is everything. In other words, if you don't want an ending for your story, don't choose a genre where the ending is the important bit. It's like if Seven ended like this.
What's in the box?
Or A Few Good Men ended like this.
Colonel Jessup, did you order the code red?
You don't have to answer that question.
I'll answer the question. You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You...
Or Rocky 2 ended like this. I'm being unfair. Let's pick a movie that is 3 separate stories about one story.
In the bag.
The second of the 3 ways A House of Dynamite went wrong with its ending is intent. Here is Kathryn Bigelow talking about the writing process for the movie.
So I found a wonderful writer, Noah Oppenheim, who is a former journalist, who's really a subject matter expert in this space. We had many conversations, and then he did a ton of research, and a few months later we had a script.
That's not my Chekhov's gun clip, by the way. If you skipped ahead to this bit to get the answer, go back to the intro and watch along like everyone else. What is really telling about that clip is that a former journalist wrote the screenplay, Noah Oppenheim. This is a red flag, not because he's not a good writer, but because of the way journalists naturally approach stories. Editorial journalism is rhetorical. Stories end with an imperative or a forecast, reaffirming an argument they've made throughout. An editorial is really a statement disguised as a question, less a journey than a message. Bigelow and Oppenheim have been very clear this movie is about generating a wider public conversation, the way a news piece would. And it's this intent which robs the journey of its power and the story of its ending. The best storytelling avoids writing with a moral agenda. If a moral happens to come from the writing, fine, but setting out to write a cautionary tale is fatal. You can tell there's a problem with drama over message in House of Dynamite by the melodramatic emotions on display, which are often used to paper over narrative cracks. We had crumpled faces and trembling lips and quivering chins and agonized stares and nervous swallows and glistening eyes, and one soldier, who was central to stopping the missile, taking a moment outside to do this. I'm not saying the real-life people whose job this is are all robots, and this is not a big, scary deal, and that military defense is a well-oiled machine, but almost every single character and system in this movie went to jelly. See, I don't think there were so many emotions on display because that's who the characters are or because that's how everyone would behave in real life. I think the emotions were there to communicate to the audience that drama is happening, and this is how you should feel about it, instead of the plot doing that for you and you feeling it for yourself. A movie gets into trouble when it relies on actors to manufacture drama in their expressions. It's not the actor's job to create drama, it's the dramatist's job. This was, I'm coining a phrase, facial exposition. In other words, the audience understands the stakes because that man is tearful, or that woman's chin is wobbling, and this guy is... And the third of the 3 ways A House of Dynamite went astray with its ending is because it's part of a larger epidemic that is decades in the making. Let's zoom out for a moment. See, a big part of the problem... Wait, let's get this out of the way.
Do you like Pillarboxer videos, Sydney?
What did you say?
I said subscribe to Pillarboxer for more videos.
That's not what you said.
Okay, not technically, but that was the general gist.
Look, I gotta go.
Wait, subscribe first.
A big part of the problem is, well, endings are really hard. Beginnings only have to hook you, whereas endings have to change you. Just a halfway decent ending requires talent and craft honed over time and great effort and a spidey sense of the audience and accidental alignment with the cultural environment outside the screen and not a little voodoo. Inspiration, that magic that manifests as a spark in the liminal space where dreams meet reality. Good luck. And this is slowly becoming a lost art. It's disappearing, and there's a reason for it. We have been programmed slowly over time to expect a story to be summed up in a sentence or two, and for that sentence to sell the experience of the story rather than the story itself. This is known as the elevator pitch, which actually didn't start in Hollywood. It came out of the advertising culture of the 50s and 60s, used to describe a persuasive campaign that could be summed up in the time that it takes to ride an elevator. Hollywood adopted the concept in the 70s during the rise of the high-concept film. This was the era that gave us Jaws and Star Wars, which changed everything. After that, movies were pitched like this. It's Jaws in space, or it's Die Hard on a bus. By the 80s, with the rise of corporate-owned studios, the elevator pitch became institutionalized in movies and TV. It helped layers of executives who needed ideas they could grasp quickly and pass up the chain easily.
That's exactly right. It's Out of Africa meets Pretty Woman.
Here is the elevator pitch for A House of Dynamite by Kathryn Bigelow herself.
What would happen if a nuclear ICBM was incoming and targeted North America? What happens in the halls of power? What are the protocols? What's the procedure? And how could it be averted?
No, that's not the Chekhov gun clip either. Be patient. So, writers, producers, and agents learned that if you can't pitch it in a sentence or two, it probably won't survive the meeting. And the audience learned it too, because your time and money is precious, and if you're going to spend it, you want to know you're getting bang for your buck. You too want the idea distilled so that you can decide whether to watch it or not. And in recent years, with premium TV and streamers and more content, this has only become more entrenched. I too am bound by this. I pitch series to development execs at production companies, and they have bosses they have to run it by before they can option it from me. Together, we then have to pitch it to a broadcaster or streamer or network, and they too have to get their nods from higher-ups before greenlighting it. And finally, at the very top is the audience, who the streamer has to pitch to in their on-screen blurbs and in trailers in order to get you to watch it. You too might be pitching it to your friends and family because you want them to share it. I have learned to pitch ideas in this manner because otherwise they go nowhere. I've literally just finished a pilot that was commissioned off the back of a paragraph that pitched the setup and the premise, but not the ending. So, all of us have become experts at beginnings, but it has come at the expense of the ending, which is often an afterthought. A great example is Lost, one of the industry's most famous pitches and one of its most contentious endings. An ending they didn't have when they started and was a can they just kept kicking down the road. Many others have fallen at the last hurdle too. Not always, of course. Breaking Bad, famous for being one of the best setups in modern series television, also stuck the landing in its conclusion 5 seasons later, but it is glaring by its exception. Somehow, in the last 75 years, what is considered the most important part of a story has shifted from the ending to the beginning. Value got placed at the wrong end. Sort of can't blame anyone for this. I mean, endings are nuanced, complicated, experiential things. Imagine if I pitched Sixth Sense to you like this. Picture it. Bruce Willis is a psychiatrist who suddenly realizes he's a ghost, which is a shock because this whole time he assumed he was alive, like we all do. And it's really powerful, though, because he just thought he was in a bad marriage. But he's not. He's dead, and that's why his wife wasn't talking to him. Endings only work because of everything that comes before. They only land because you've had the layered, cumulative emotional experience that comes with following the trials and tribulations of a character's journey as if it were your own. Whereas beginnings are about possibilities. They excite the listener's imagination, their dreams of what could be. Not so with endings, which are definitive, not open, and give the development producer and the audience more reasons to say no. As a result, over decades of the elevator pitch, the art of endings has slowly withered, the way an ancient community loses parts of their culture through modernity. What a system stops practicing, it stops needing. What it stops needing, it forgets. Like ancient languages, ceremonies, technologies, the technique of good endings can slowly erode too, until it's nothing but a phantom limb you want to itch but can't. Despite all of this, though, I think A House of Dynamite is propulsive, and it does make you lean forward and want to know what happens next. And so it might have gotten away with it, including its non-ending, if it hadn't made one crucial creative mistake. Yes, this is my Chekhov's gun clip.
I wanted to do it in real time, but real time meant an 18 or 19-minute film. Which...
What Bigelow says there is so quick you might miss it, but it has profound implications because everything spirals out from that one decision, and it is arguably a death spiral, because telling the story 3 times over, whether it's from a different perspective or not, has a very curious effect. Every time we cut just before the climax of a thread, it reinforces the idea that a climax is coming. A promise is being made that's never kept. Okay, so missiles can arrive in 18 minutes, so they're locked into that, but they're not locked into real time. That's a creative choice, and it has its merits, but it's not the only way. Even if you want this effect, there are all kinds of real time because time is perceptive. Using characters' distorted perspectives, you could stretch 18 minutes into almost whatever you want. But by locking into real time and insisting it matches the audience's time, it forced them to improvise and repeat the story 3 times. This had several knock-on effects. 1, it committed them to the thriller genre, which demands you deliver a specific kind of ending. 2, it naturally multiplies characters at the same time as shortening their journeys, which is crippling, because the success of an ending depends on the emotional character journey preceding it. And the more characters you have, the more that gets diluted and lost. And 3, and worst of all, when you repeat a sequence from a different perspective, cutting just before the ending each time, you train the audience to think there will be a reveal that will come with the final one. Each time you repeat, you reinforce the promise that everything will eventually make sense when that was never your goal. This one little creative decision was a sliding doors moment. Had they kept to one single story thread and even kept everything else the same, including an ending with no explosion, they probably would have gotten away with it. Because there are ways to break the contract that in a movie about a bomb, something must blow up. You may have heard the storytelling principle that a good ending must be both surprising and inevitable, that it was always leading to this point, but somehow, as an audience, you still got caught out by it. Well, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that while the inevitable part is essential, the surprising part is not always necessary. It's just the case most often in mainstream commercial movies. But there is another kind of story ending, the kind that is meditative instead of surprising. To use life and death to illustrate the point, a surprising and inevitable story ending is like a person you thought would live suddenly dies, shocking you, or vice versa, a person you thought was going to die suddenly lives, and yet when it happens, it's absolutely fitting with what came before. Of course, this is the outcome. You realize all the events were leading unstoppably to this moment. Even though it's a shock, it all makes sense, and yet somehow you didn't see it coming. By contrast, a story ending with inevitability but without surprise is like a person with a long terminal illness finally dying. There's nothing surprising about it, just a sense of release, but that doesn't mean that that death has no meaning or can't be as powerful as a surprising death. It just means that that meaning is diffused over the illness that precedes it, which is reflective, painful, poetic, often beautiful and bittersweet as the person and the people around them gradually come to terms with it. The final death is a catharsis, the same as a surprising death or a sudden survival. It's just of a wholly different type. No surprise, but just as much of a journey. And so it is with its fictional twin. A movie with an inevitable but not surprising ending requires all of those deeper, insightful, reflective elements that precede the ending. This is crucially what A House of Dynamite was missing. Not the explosion, but the insight. In place of reflection, it had mummy and daddy phone calls and computer graphics and... In other words, it's a long illness as told from the point of view of medical staff and life support machines, where the ending is this.